We are ready. Okay, hello everyone. We are here live at ADLM, and today we're going to be doing a podcast talking about our new LIAISON NES point of care system. So I'm Michelle Tabb, the Chief Scientific Officer for the DSORN Molecular Division, and today's podcast is called Bridging the Bench with LIAISON NES Point of Care Powered Up. And today it's my pleasure to be joined by Dr. Jesse Young. He is the Medical Director of Point of Care Testing and the Medical Director of Clinical Device Trials and Research for TriCor Reference Lab. So welcome, Jesse. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to talk about DSORN's new point of care test from the NES.
Fantastic. So let's right off the bat set the stage. What does the TriCor point of care testing network look like? And then if you could also touch on why does the point of care setting demand a different evaluation lens than you might think of with traditional laboratory instruments? So how do you look at that differently?
Absolutely. Just to set the stage, so TriCor is a very centralized testing paradigm. We are a full-service diagnostic lab, and we have a sort of non-traditional setup where we're actually servicing 3 different medical groups, and that includes the University of New Mexico, Lovelace, and Presbyterian Health Systems. So what that creates is a little bit of diversity in each one of those systems that we have to support. And just to give an idea of the size, it's actually quite large. We have 170 different PCCs, about 10,000 unique operators that we're all trying to manage and keep track of as we continue to test and develop in the point of care space. So it's been an exercise in patience, and thank goodness for the wonderful people that we have on the operation side that are dealing with each one of those different endpoints to push the envelope there. And to move to your question about, why do we need to watch it under a different lens? There are a lot of different things that change when we're thinking about the lab versus a patient care center and what the actual operators themselves are doing, what the test result is saying, who can deliver that result, how we're linking that to our reporting centers. And I think more often than not, we sometimes forget that in that particular setting, that result may be impacting that patient immediately when we're thinking about, we have time to ascertain whether or not they have flu or not. Really, when we're turning these tests around so fast, we're hoping to get to that patient right there and right then. But we also have to consider, as point of care develops, what are those tests actually saying, and are we prepared to deliver that care?
Yes.
So
not every test should even be on a point of care system, right?
You got it.
Okay.
And I think that will continue to be an argument as we go forward and we see people continue to develop in this space.
And
what's appropriate when.
And in different care settings, what's appropriate is what your point is too, right?
Absolutely. In thinking about a single practitioner's private office versus something like my UNMH emergency department. Very different, one provider, one patient versus one provider, 40 patients. So, I think it creates a lot of different endpoints that we need to consider, and the quality of data really matters, and making sure that we're generating the right endpoints for those patients is really important.
Okay, thank you for the setup and the scenario. So you've developed a framework called the TEST framework. TEST meaning T-E-S-T. It's an acronym. T being for test performance, E for execution, S for system impact, and T for trust to actually evaluate the NES system, which you have in your laboratories now. Yep. And why is that kind of a system particularly relevant for NES versus existing systems as you evaluate it?
Right, so the test framework is something that we're sort of thinking about and we're beginning to work up, because I think it's really important that we do our best to balance operational and execution endpoints as well as the data. The right test, right time is maybe the most cliche thing we've ever heard.
Yeah, sure it is.
But I think simultaneously we have to take our laboratorian minds and apply that to these new testing endpoints. So by using the test framework, we're able to really develop that and try to take a bit more of an agnostic, what are we looking at for test performance? What does test performance mean? We're laboratorians. How do we then look at execution? How do we look at system impact? And then finally, how do we develop trust so that we're not just testing in the oblivion and we're not sure if that test is the right test?
So let's dive into the first letter of test, T, or test performance. So you have the IFU for the LIAISON NES, flu A, flu B, RSV, and COVID assay. Right. So from your perspective, what did that clinical data in our IFU look like? And maybe how did the performance compare to what other labs are already seeing from other point of care molecular respiratory devices?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with T for test performance, right? I think looking at the IFU and cracking down on, what our PPA, NPA is always really useful. I think as laboratorians, our brains automatically go there. But then what does that mean contextually? Are we comparing against a lateral flow, or are we comparing against an incumbent molecular assay? And when you actually look at the data, I was really happy to see that DiaSorin had done a really nice job in comparing to some of our standardized molecular platforms in the lab already. So that really helped us to stand behind what DiaSorin has done in meeting a lot of these PPA, NPA endpoints, 98 to 88% and 100% on the NPA. Really good for the 4 targets on the ABCR assay. And that's really meaningful because that immediately means that, hey, this test performance is what not only we expect, but what we hope to see out of a point of care platform. So I think that's really useful, but some of the other things that are operationally important, remembering that there's 2 sides to the coin, right? We don't care, it's not just how good it is molecularly, it's also how good some of the operational endpoints. So other things that were meaningful to me is low failure rate of the cartridge, because although we have, the opportunity to retest, these patients should be still in the room. We don't always have them still around. So not losing that patient and having a low failure rate means that my providers aren't like skittering through the ED to go and resample. Although it's an accessible sample type, we still have to be careful with that. Secondarily, good controls, right? Good controls is critical. We're not messing around with, this one's strange. So really low failure rates of both the cartridge and control really helps us impact our endpoints and make sure that when we're using the test, that we're actually able to use the test and that we can trust its performance for the targets offered, and that we're not going to have to deal with the administrative or the lab life of, that one needs to be rerun for controls, or the controls are failing, or we have a cartridge lot issue. So that really helps us to be able to deliver the right point of care test at the right time.
Okay, and you touched on that lab quality performance too. So with the real-time PCR chemistry that we have in there, basically it's the same thing that you can get in one of the larger, higher complex lab systems, right? And it's delivering, and we're comparing against that kind of performance too, as to your point in the IFU.
Yeah, that means a lot, right? All of a sudden, we have molecular grade reactions at the point of care. And, I think something we'll probably touch on is there's been a lot of doubt over the years on point of care platforms. Yes. A lot of laboratorians don't trust that or even cast a negative light on point of care. And I think what DiaSorin is doing here actually really gives us a good opportunity to begin breaking down that wall and saying, hey, this is the molecular performance you're used to. We've just miniaturized it and it's available. And hey, we've already compared against your incumbent systems. One of the things that we sometimes forget about is that just because I'm testing for respiratory at point of care doesn't mean that I haven't done the equivalent study to my platforms in the lab, because guess what? It all reports the same.
Yeah, exactly.
COVID I don't write on that patient report, this is X other manufacturer or DiaSorin. I write COVID positive. So there's a lot of equivalence that actually goes on in labs for what that reporting piece looks like. So that's really something that gives me a lot of confidence in a test like this where, we've already looked at a lot of these platforms. I'm still going to have to do it, but then I'm not doubting, or I'm not like, it only matched 90% of the time. Are we going to accept that? How do we deal with that? Yeah. So definitely a fun piece.
Okay, interesting. So what particularly makes NES a strong fit for the urgent care and outpatient setting? So let's start talking about some of the features that you've experienced. And also in particular, is NES easier to standardize across a large point of care network? I know you have, more than 70 sites maybe, so this might be really relevant for those who are thinking about, can you really deploy this thing everywhere? And that versus some other platforms that are point of care that you might need to manage similarly.
Yes, so this is one of the key execution pieces, right? E for execution in our test framework. So I think what's really unique about this is we have the opportunity to look at a very simplistic workflow for that molecular grade chemistry. What that means to me is really there's only 3 interaction steps. So you swab, you put the swab into the reagent, and then you put it into the cartridge, and then you load. And some of the benefits of the workflow also include a lot of really good QR coding. And what that means is that, the controls are QR'd, the cartridge is QR'd. All these things move really seamlessly. I scan the patient, put it in, put the assay in, and it knows. And that really helps. And this is not dissimilar from other platforms, but I think the way that the NES actually employs it, where you're scanning once, as opposed to some of the other folks that are scanning twice, or the order matters.
But all those steps actually add up.
They add up. They're touch points.
Exactly.
And if you're moving fast, you have to remember that cadence. And more importantly, I think the way that the NES cartridge was designed and how the pre-analytical steps are administered is really important, because I feel that it's very difficult to miss some of those steps. I mentioned swab into buffer into cartridge, and the way that sort of ports in. I think that's really important, because you're going to know if that swab didn't make it into the actual buffer, and then when you squeeze it in, you just squeeze it all in. There's no drops, there's no capping, there's no any of those endpoints.
So in particular, for like a typical waved operator, which is different than other laboratorians, so it sounds like this is really fit for that purpose, for those operators, but for anybody above that as well.
Yeah, I mean, ease is universal, right? Just because you're a high complexity operator doesn't mean that you're not going to be gracious towards a simplistic hands-on endpoint, right? But again, it really facilitates for all these different areas where you have somebody that's maybe in an emergency department that is familiar with these, or all the way down to that single practitioner's office where they're trying to minimize that workflow, not lose steps in the in-between. And then I think even in the high complexity space, we still do some of this in high complexity spaces, just because that test or that particular assay fits that particular need. So we're able to do that.
Okay. Also sticking with that daily use. So now we've got some waved operators, but this system can go a lot of different places, a lot of different environments. But what about as somebody who's running a program, that compliance and quality aspect? So can you comment on the feature of the DSORN Cloud and how that might help?
I can, and I'm actually going to go back and answer a question that you asked me from the previous. Great. How do you deploy this across a big system? Yeah. Well, the cloud actually answers some of that. Yeah. So thinking about daily QC, what the cloud does is it's a wonderful mechanism to actually track users, to track QC, to track all of your different instruments across those implementations. What that really means to me is that I have a tool that means that I don't have to have administrators or managers or supervisors traveling just to check on instruments anymore. I don't always need to have, even as painful as it is to say, some sites are still manually tracking QC. That can go away with platforms like this, and the easier it is to actually use these clouds and the more information, the better. Going further into this, the ability to actually add users from afar or manage those users, lock them out, is even something that can answer some of our ongoing CAPAs. Believe it or not, we had people who were badge sharing, actually. This is a common checklist item that people get faulted for. It sounds crazy, but the ability to control and lock out users and say, hey, so-and-so's badge has been used by 6 people, we're going to shut that down. If you're a trained operator, you need to know your ID. We can actually manage that all from the cloud, and this is really helpful, and we can actually put that as a corrective action and show our regulatory agencies that, hey, we're aware of this and we've implemented these tools.
So for compliance, this is beautiful.
Yep, very good.
Okay, fantastic.
One other add there for compliance is that I've been really excited to talk about this because I think it's my favorite thing about the NES and how you guys are getting this off the ground is the training kit.
Okay.
I just love the training kit because we're talking about compliance and QC.
So what comes in the training kit?
Right now, the one that I got, which is the commercial one, which is great, has all the QC, it has all of your CRFs, your quick reference guides, and more importantly, like setup guides that are really great. So just running through that quickly, we got a QRG, or a quick reference guide for setup that is just a couple of steps, but had this really great QR code. So you're actually able to watch a video on how to put it on the bench, which, I bet you some people would roll their eyes, but for me, I think that's becoming important because that means it's very accessible. That means that as our staff turns over, they're going to have opportunities to understand that, and they can watch a video and put it on the bench and begin testing and get their IQ done. I think we were able to do this in like under 2 hours to IQ completion, which is pretty great from a closed shipment box. I'm about it. That means that testing is right there.
And for those people who don't know, IQ is instrument qualification. Like it's part of the process when you're setting up a new system. So
thank you for defining that. Apologies, jargon.
No problem. So let's switch. We're going through test. So we're on
Yep.
S. So S is for system impact. How does a rapid wage point of care molecular platform like NES fit into diagnostic stewardship and near patient decision making, which you touched on earlier, but what do you think about that?
Immediately, some experiences that, TriCore is a full service diagnostic lab that serves all these different areas. And I bring that back because we've lost substantial amounts of money because people are getting outpatient orders for huge syndromic panels. That's a really bad thing. So talking about system impact, the better a point of care test is, the easier it is to get that into different areas, the better it is for triage endpoints so that we're not ordering massive panels on outpatients and losing reimbursement and payer endpoints. There's a lot of other system impacts, and something that I think is fresh and new that you haven't heard me talk about before is that in our recent work with LIAISON and Telcor to try to bring drivers to the table here, we've actually learned that you guys have done a really nice job of creating a data flow, or that white paper IT stuff that some of us as scientists can't read. Just me. We're able to actually leverage that and say, hey, these are familiar data types that we're able to build into our LIS, into our test servers, and into our prod validations. So that means if we're doing any respiratory testing, a lot of times it can fit, and the CSVs and the endpoint data are actually really tenable in our systems to build quickly. So that really helps, and that reduces some system impact, because for most people who are interested in implementing, we fight with our ITs, we fight with the companies, we fight with the middlewares.
Get in the queue, it takes time.
And LIAISON has done a nice job stepping into this realm, realizing that that is an issue, and then more importantly, addressing it by turning around and working proactively with those companies in a data format to train, to learn, and to implement solutions to what we might struggle with, where our implementation is suddenly, well, I bought the instrument 8 months ago, I'm not testing. We already have Telcor drivers that we've co-developed. We already know that we can connect and network.
And thank you for doing that study also, because I think it'll be fantastic for others to look at this and kind of check the boxes basically and say, okay, this is set up and beautifully flowing.
Yeah, and we've learned a lot. I think Telcor has learned a lot. LIAISON certainly has learned a lot in the collaboration. And it's really going to ease that pain point for a lot of us in that development, where we're getting stuck and we're endlessly on the phone with IT, or I'm missing something or they're missing something. And it's been fun to really get into the weeds with that and see what the struggles have been.
Okay. So finally, let's close on the last T. So T for trust. So can you share what your actual hands-on system experience and actually the performance data that you've seen so far, because you are doing a study head-to-head with another platform, and so maybe you want to comment on that?
This is one of the best parts of my job. I really am passionate about comparative data.
Yes.
It's something that is really important for me in the learning process, and we've had the experience with the NES to test versus incumbent, and we've seen really good performance, 100% concordance between that platform. We have had positives. We did do a bit of a pilot. This is going to continue to develop, but we saw 100% concordance across several enrolled patients, including positive targets such as RSV, which is really great, because that means that I'm not, again, going all the way back to the first T of test performance. Now I'm gaining trust based on physical hands-on test performance. So although it's just a framework, it is a bit of a feedback loop that we're using to develop and think critically not only about operations, but the molecular science that drives the decisions that we report. So we're in good shape. Okay,
fantastic. And also, you will eventually, once complete, be publishing that. So for those of you wondering what the performance actually looks like, you will see that. And actually, you'll be able to do it for yourselves also if you want to compare against the existing point-of-care platforms that you have. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So for closing up here on our discussion on this LIAISON NES platform and our first assay, flu A, flu B, RSV, and COVID, what is your closing message for those point-of-care stakeholders that would be considering using our LIAISON NES platform, not just for the respiratory assay that I just spoke of, but even now for Group A strep, which is also FDA cleared?
Yeah, congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
So I think we're really looking at a system that could disrupt the market because of some of the connectivity. I know we're in a shortened format, but something that I want to quickly touch on, just to let the folks at home and the folks outside of the booth here, beautiful booth, by the way. The cloud is so much more than just a data-centric endpoint too. It really is a full-service suite where there's training, there is troubleshooting, in addition to that data management piece. And I think this is really critical for me because that means, again, there's less admin impact. And now we have a system that is capable of working with our providers and really our staff at that interface for not only what that result is, but for what's going on in their lab. Like, why does the instrument not working? Why, is there something wrong? It's going to tell you very plainly, and more importantly, if I have a new operator, they can step up to it and they can train right there at the interface, and they can learn about the instrument. They can go online, and you guys have done a nice job integrating those checklists as well for the training. So I have an OQ, so IQ, OQ, instrument qualification, operator qualification. That is all packaged in the DiaSorin NES cloud that now is going to be able to answer a lot of our biggest triage high usage cases from your ABCR assay for our respiratory endpoints and your group A strep. We kind of have this really nice triageable piece, which is what we experience more often than not in those point of care settings.
Okay. And as you already mentioned earlier too, as the medical director, because of the cloud, it's like being there at those remote sites.
You got it.
Watching over everything at the same time.
Yep.
So
helps my operations team keep tabs very closely. We can lock those users out. We can add users. We can make sure people have done their PT all on this cloud. And this is a really wonderful piece that is being developed for impact on that endpoint. And I've really had a good experience with the instrument. I think the other thing that we've done as part of the exercise, and we've talked about this study, we really worked even on troubleshooting, and I want to state this clearly for the listeners that DiaSorin has also embraced this replace instead of repair.
Yes.
And this is incredibly great. This is a wonderful thing, and we actually had a really fun opportunity, which was a new experience for me, to train some of the professionals on the DiaSorin side that would help with those calls, both in a scripted, because we needed to do some training. And then I broke one because it's me, and I sometimes break stuff. And then we had a real experience, and it still worked.
Excellent.
And for a first foray, we're talking about now something that has a cloud, it has really strong test performance, and it's going to have support, capping off T one more time.
Yes.
I have to trust who I'm calling and to understand that I'm not going to get, I need 7,000 error codes to decide if it's broken. I may not have tons of redundancy. So I think, knowing that support right out of the gate is coming from a POC-minded mindset.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to DiaSorin continuing to push this platform and continuing to develop more assays for it. And again, we're already up to 2.
I know.
Here we go, DiaSorin. What comes next?
We're planning on continuing the path there and developing some more on this platform. So
Absolutely.
It sounds like it's been super robust for you. You've had a great experience. And Jesse, I really thank you for sharing your experience today and for sharing that with everyone online listening and in this podcast. So I hope you have a great rest of your trip out here to Anaheim, California. And it's nice to see you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you guys so much. Great opportunity, and happy to converse with anybody if you have questions. I'm not real shy, so come find me.
That's okay. That's a good thing.
Chat through it.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time
Thanks
today,
again,
Jesse.
Michelle.
Okay, take care.
Bye.